Hey, how's it going? Devin here again with CountryGuitarOnline.com. And in today's guitar lesson, we are going to keep unlocking the mystery of how to play lead guitar. And if you're just now joining us for this course, previously in this course we've talked about the guitar scales that you should start learning. We've also talked about how to use these guitar scales, how to create guitar riffs with these scales. The main thing we're working on is improvising lead guitar solos. Creating a guitar solo over any song in any key. And we're focusing mostly on country and bluegrass, trying to get that country and bluegrass sound. And in this course specifically, we've really been focusing on bluegrass a lot. But just know that even if you're not interested in learning bluegrass, this is very helpful stuff for playing country music and for playing country lead guitar, classic country lead guitar. The main thing that I like to do is take a lot of these bluegrass licks and a lot of these bluegrass soloing ideas, slow them down and add a little syncopated rhythm to them, and all of a sudden the same exact riffs, the same exact soloing concepts, they go from being bluegrass to more of like a old school classic country sound. And you'll see what I mean here as we keep working through this course. So what are we going to do in this lesson? So today we are going to take a step back and I'm going to talk about some different types of guitar solos. This will make sense once I start talking about it, but this is very, very important stuff. It'll help you kind of wrap your head around creating a guitar solo. After we talk about some different types of guitar solos, then we're actually going to look at one of these types of guitar solos in detail in this lesson. And then in future lessons, we'll talk about some of the other types of solos, and we'll just start building on little concepts, one lesson at a time. And by the end of this lesson series, you'll be able to improvise some really, really awesome guitar solos over any song in any key. So you can really turn some heads at your next bluegrass jam or wherever you go and play your guitar. So cool stuff. Let's go ahead and start talking about these types of guitar solos. The first type of guitar solo that we'll talk about is the melodic guitar solo. And that's basically where you're just going to play the song's melody line on your guitar. A real simple example of the melodic guitar solo. Let's say we're trying to play a guitar solo over the song Will the Circle Be Unbroken. Most people recognize this song's melody. Will the circle be unbroken? That song right there. Will the circle be unbroken? The melodic guitar solo. So all we're going to do for this melodic solo is try to play that vocal melody line on our guitar. Very simple example. Lots of different ways to make the melodic guitar solo sound a lot fancier. You can start adding hammer-ons, pull-offs, slides. You can add in some stock bluegrass licks in certain spots to make it much fancier. We'll talk about all that stuff here a little bit later in the lesson, but that's the first type of guitar solo, and that is really the starting point for creating an interesting guitar solo. You got to know where that melody line is. And if there's no vocal melody line, there's usually always a melody line in every song. You just be able to pick that out on your guitar. You don't have to play it note for note in your guitar solo, but if you can get close to that melody line, start pulling in some of those notes, your solos will make a lot more sense. Most songs are in a major key also, so these melodic solos, a lot of the times you can pull the notes straight from the major scale. So in this example, playing this solo over Will the Circle Be Unbroken, this song is in the key of G, and we got the G major scale, the 5th position, right here in this location. We've been talking about the 5th position G major scale a lot. But a lot of those melody line notes from this song, those notes are basically pulled straight from that major scale. So if you know the major scale very well, that will go a really long way if you're trying to pick out a song's melody line to make your solo sound more interesting. So that's the first type of solo. It's a melodic guitar solo. The second type of guitar solo we'll talk about is the solo where you're just going to play a bunch of stock country and bluegrass licks for the entire solo. And an example of this, let's keep talking about Will the Circle Be Unbroken, and we're soloing in the key of G. So for this type of solo, this stock country and bluegrass lick solo, you're just going to take a bunch of those licks that you know and you're going to string them together to create a full-length solo. We have a ton of stock classic country and bluegrass licks in our Bluegrass Lick library. I'll put a link below this video so you can go check that out if you haven't already. But a lot of these stock licks I'm talking about, they sound something like this. So these licks are very useful, and this second type of guitar solo could be one of the most useful types of guitar solos because you can play this type of solo over a lot of different songs. You just have to know what key the song is in, and you have to know a lot of these licks in that key. But you can just take a lot of the licks you know and string them together in different ways to create some pretty awesome solos. We'll talk about that type of solo in a future lesson, and we'll take some of these stock bluegrass licks, exactly like I have them tabbed out in our Bluegrass Lick library. We'll take those licks and we'll piece them together to create a guitar solo over Will the Circle Be Unbroken. So that's the second type of guitar solo we'll talk about. It's the stock country and bluegrass lick solo. The third type of guitar solo we'll talk about is the kind of solo where you're going to play country and bluegrass licks that are built around the open chords that the rhythm guitar is playing. So as you're playing your guitar solo, the rhythm guitar and all the other instruments, they're going to be playing the rhythm chord progression. So you're going to play a solo that follows right along with that rhythm chord progression. Quick example of this, let's keep looking at Will the Circle Be Unbroken. This song's in the key of G, just like we've been talking about. And while you're playing your guitar solo, at the beginning of the solo, everybody's going to be playing that G major chord. And so you can play some country and bluegrass licks that are built around that G major chord while they're playing the G major chord. Licks right there fit very nicely over that G chord. Then when everybody switches to the C chord in this progression, you're going to play some licks that are built around the C chord. And something like that. You can hear how a lot of those are built right over that C chord. Then when everybody switches to the D chord, you'll play some licks that are built around the D chord. So rhythm is playing this, and you're going to play something like, you can hear how it sounds nice over that D chord. It's hard to hear this a little bit unless you've got the actual rhythm guitar backing you up while you're playing these licks, but you get the idea. You're going to play licks that are built around the open chords. And we've talked about this a lot in other lessons, but this may be one of my favorite ways to create a guitar solo because it's so useful. Because if you know a lot of these type of licks that are built around the open chords, you can basically play a really awesome sounding solo over any song, as long as you know what key the song is in. And most songs are in the key of G, and a lot of times people just capo anyways and just play those key of G chord shapes, so you can play a lot of these same exact type of licks in G over a bunch of different songs that are in other keys, just using that capo. So that is the third type of solo. That's where you're playing licks built around the open chords of the rhythm guitar. We'll talk about that solo in a lot of detail in future lessons, but that's the third type right there. And we're almost done. The fourth type of guitar solo we'll talk about is the kind where you're going to mix the song's melody line with the stock country and bluegrass licks. So it's kind of a hybrid of the two. You got the melody line mixed with these bluegrass licks. So earlier, that first type of solo we were talking about is the basic melody line. And then we were talking about playing solos using just these bluegrass licks. So in this type of soloing, this fourth kind, this hybrid type of soloing, we're going to mix those two things together. And we can even start throwing in some of those licks built around the open chords once we get to this hybrid type of soloing. And this is really what we're working towards, mixing the song's melody line with stock bluegrass licks. Lots of different techniques on how to do this, and I cannot wait to show you all those as we keep working through this course, because that is really where your solos are going to start to come to life. So when you can mix this melody line or mix a song's melody line with bluegrass licks, then your solo really sounds like it belongs in the song, but it still has that really nice, hard driving country and bluegrass sound that we're going for. And finally, the fifth type of guitar solo we'll talk about is the cross-picking guitar solo. And if you're not familiar with cross-picking, very simple definition of cross-picking is when you play a grouping of 3 strings in a pattern that repeats over and over again. So when you're cross-picking, most of the time you're going to be holding down some type of chord with your left hand or your fretting hand. So in this case, I'm just going to hold down the G major chord. And then when we do cross-picking, the right hand is going to play the cross-picking pattern. Most times in country and bluegrass, cross-picking is done using 3 strings. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's the 3-string pattern that repeats over and over. But you could also do a 4-string pattern. Lots of different ways to use cross-picking, and we will talk about this in a lot of detail in future lessons, but just know that cross-picking is a great way to play an entire solo without having to think too much about using the scale shapes. You're just thinking about the chord progression, and then it's all right hand work. Just build up that pick control to where you can play some awesome cross-picking solos. So a quick example of cross-picking solo over Will the Circle Be Unbroken? Will the circle be unbroken? You get an idea right there of what a little cross-picking solo might sound like. And that's a great way to play a guitar solo without having to think about the scale shapes that much. Because all you really have to think about when you're doing a cross-picking solo, you got to think about the chord changes, and you already know the rhythm progression in most cases. So you just change the chords right along with the rhythm guitar, but you're just going to be playing your guitar solo, your cross-picking solo with that right hand and making it fancier with that cross-picking. And we'll talk about a ton of different ways to incorporate cross-picking into guitar solos in future lessons. So there's a list of some really common types of country and bluegrass guitar solos. And in this lesson, we're going to take a close look at the melodic guitar solo. Here in a minute, I'm going to have you all do a little ear training, and I'm going to play the basic melody of Will the Circle Be Unbroken on my guitar. I will put the tablature up on the screen, but what I think I'd like y'all to try to do is look away from the screen and just listen to me playing that simple melody and try to pick it out on your guitar on your own. And don't worry about getting the notes exactly like I'm playing them. The main idea is to just get that melody line down to where you can recognize the main melody line notes, and you can start using your ear to pick out the melody line on your guitar. After you take a stab at doing some ear training, then what we're going to do is I'm going to walk through a little more complex version of a melodic solo. We're going to talk about adding in some extra accent notes, and we'll talk about adding in some hammer-ons and pull-offs and slides, and we'll also talk about adding in some basic bluegrass licks in key locations within your melodic solo to make your melodic solo sound a lot fancier. So that's what we're going to do for the rest of this lesson. So hopefully that was helpful, and if y'all have any questions on these types of solos, you can drop them in the comment box below this video, but we will be covering each one of these types of solos in a lot of detail in future lessons, and just trying to create a structured approach to learning the different types of solos. And then once you get each of these little types of solos down, the end goal is for you to be able to mix all these types of solos together, and it's just all kind of in your head, and you can visualize all these different techniques on the guitar. And this just takes practice. The more you improvise solos, the better you're going to get at improvising solos in each of these type of ways, and then mixing all this stuff together. I'm still working on this a lot. It's just a lifetime of learning how to play hard driving country and bluegrass solos, but hopefully I can kind of steer y'all in the right direction. But at this point, let's do a little ear training and try to pick out that melody line for Will the Circle Be Unbroken.